Archer. I'm the author of Short Story Collection Volume 1, Lost Girl, The Mirror Hunter Chronicles, and most recently the novel Calligraphy Guild, which I am super proud of, super excited to finally be able to share with readers. And I've indie published all four of those novels, or books rather. So today I'm going to be answering questions about the indie publishing process and how that works. So give me just a second to set some things up. And I'll give people a couple minutes to start getting going, starting to get in here, get onto the stream, and then we'll get started. That's all set now. Alright, to get started, so that we're not just sitting around in awkward silence, I have a couple of questions that got sent in ahead of time by authors who couldn't make the live stream. So Aaron asked, how do you find sensitivity readers and what is that process like? So for Calligraphy Guild, I had sensitivity readers for the chronic illness representation. I have two characters in Calligraphy Guild who have chronic illnesses. So I wanted to make sure that I was portraying that accurately. So I got a handful of readers who have personal experience with chronic illness to read it over and give me feedback on that aspect of the story. And different authors get sensitivity readers for different things. You might get sensitivity readers for a disability or for PTSD or a particular culture that you want to be presenting accurately. There are a number of things that you might get sensitivity readers for. For me, chronic illness was something that was easy to find sensitivity readers for because I decided to include chronic illness because of people I knew who struggle with chronic illness. So I already knew people who had those experiences and read the sort of things that I write. So I was able to just ask them, hey, would you be willing to read this book and give feedback on the chronic illness representation? And yeah, so it wasn't very difficult for me to find sensitivity readers for that. So just knowing your community helps, and choosing to represent things that you know people who have experienced. Of course, sometimes you want to, your story demands that you represent something that you don't know people with particular experience in. So I have particular characters in some other books that I'm writing who have PTSD. And I honestly don't know where I'm going to find the sensitivity readers for that. But um, yeah, so some things are easier or more difficult to find sensitivity readers for. But as far as the process, I'm sorry I can't be more helpful on finding sensitivity readers. But as far as the process, you reach out and ask if someone would be willing to read your book and give feedback on whatever particular element you need sensitivity readers for. And then you send over your book. You might have particular things you want to ask about, like, is this particular scene accurate, or did I get thus and such a detail right, or whatever. Or you might just leave it open-ended and be like, can you just point out all of the things that are good or that were not quite right or whatever. Um, if I recall correctly, when I sent Calligraphy Guild to people, it was more open-ended. I was just like, can you give me general feedback on how the chronic illness is represented and if it seems accurate? Um, and so then my readers came, they read it. I gave them a month, I want to say. It might have been a couple of months to read it. Um, and then they gave me their feedback, emailed me their feedback, except my mom, who gave me feedback directly. Um, and I used that to then strengthen the story. Um, Also, research is super important before sensitivity readers. So you want to really do your research beforehand as you're writing and as you're editing on your own and all of that. It makes things easier on your sensitivity readers, both because they'll have less to critique and also because it's establishing that you really do want to make your book as accurate and sensitive to people as possible. Um, so, yeah, if you're doing chronic illness or PTSD or whatever, do your research first and then get real people to give feedback from their actual personal experiences. Um, and now, after it's been like 7 minutes already, it occurs to me I made sure that all of the video and sound is working and all of that. So just like let me know if there are any problems with that. I feel like there was something else that I thought of in there that I should have mentioned up front. Oh, the live stream will be about half an hour, maybe 45 minutes if we have enough questions. Um, and then if we get rolling and there are more questions toward the end, you can leave them in the comments or message me through the contact page on my blog or whatever, and I will get back to those when I have time later outside of the live stream. But for now, I have one more question ahead of time, and whenever y'all have questions, you can put them in the chat, and I will get to them for the live stream. But Maple asked, what are your thoughts on hybrid publishing? So hybrid publishing, for those of you who don't know, is the idea of publishing both indie and traditional. Not the same book, but like publishing some of your works independently and publishing some of them through publishing houses. I have, yeah, I have thoughts on hybrid publishing. For me personally, I think it would be really cool to go hybrid at some point because I think it would be really helpful and interesting to have the experience of both sides. I think that would be a great learning experience to go through both and learn the different skills that are involved in both. Um, the thing about it is it's a lot more research because you have to research both publishing paths. Um, and um, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so it's a lot more research and a lot more. Um, it's more work in some ways. But I think that the two different paths can complement each other because you learn certain skills that you can apply to both. Like platform building, a lot of times there's this impression that traditional publishers will do a bunch of your marketing for you, and traditional publishers do help a lot in that area, but you still have to do a lot of your marketing yourself. And if you've already practiced indie publishing and you've done all of the marketing yourself, then you already have those skills that you can then apply to a traditionally published book later down the road. So that's at least one direction that can help. Um, it also depends on what your goals are. If you really want for your books to be very, um, if you want to have like total creative control and that's why you chose independent publishing, um, then I think it can still be helpful or interesting to go the traditional publishing path once or twice and see how that balance works. And um, maybe even because I think there's a fear in the indie publishing realm. I think there's kind of a fear of traditional publishers stealing creative freedom and all of that. And I don't think that that's justified. So I feel like going hybrid could also have the benefit of kind of dispelling that fear and giving firsthand experience of, okay, what do they actually do and influence and all of that. Um, so yeah, but if your goal is more reach, or like if you want to use traditional publishing to get more reach for your already indie published books, or see, I'm trying to think of examples that go the other direction because I started out indie, so I automatically think of like if you want to go traditional after you've indie published. Um, but then like if you want if you've already been traditionally publishing and then you want to do some of that stuff yourself, or you want to um, if you want more say over particular things, and then you have that established platform from your traditional publishing and you want to use that to build an indie publishing career. Um, so yeah, I think that they can go hand in hand. I think hybrid publishing is can definitely be a smart way to go. I don't think it's a necessary way to go if you really prefer indie publishing or you really love traditional publishing. Sticking with one, um, I think it can be simpler to stick with one. Um, but if you like having more experiences, broader experiences with publishing, or you have particular goals that hybrid publishing particularly supports, um, then yeah, go for it. I think hybrid publishing is really interesting and it's definitely something I would like to try eventually. All right. So that was all of the questions that I had ahead of time. So if y'all have questions, drop them in the chat. I will get to those. And they can be questions about like the editing process or the marketing process or like the active publishing process, um, anything like that. Beta reading, alpha reading. There's a lot that goes into indie publishing, so there's a lot there to sort of unpack. And I will try to not be totally awkward in between questions. I'm trying to think. Because I'm sure there are things that I can talk about like in between that might prompt questions or answer questions that because I know for me when I go to Q&A sessions it's like, well, I know there are things that I want to know, but I don't know what I want to know, or like I don't know what I don't know. Um, so I know that can be tough. Heard of beta reading but not alpha reading. Okay. So yeah, I have an article about this, but essentially alpha reading is when you have a couple of readers who read like your first or second draft and give really early feedback on it. And then beta readers read a later draft when you're doing more editing and that sort of thing. And you really want a lot of reader feedback to figure out what's working and what's not working and how things are coming across from a reader perspective. So alpha readers are more, they're going to give you feedback and they're going to give you critique, but they're also going to sort of encourage you and push you through the process most of the time. So for Calligraphy Guild, for example, I had 2 alpha readers, and they helped out throughout the process. So I think the first draft that they read was the second draft, and so they read the second draft and gave me feedback. I think I had particular questions for them as well, like I had with my beta readers. And I was like, how is this thing coming across, and which character is your favorite, and that sort of thing. And then they also read, after I had done a bunch of self edits, the next time that I sent it to readers, they got to read it. They got to read it alongside my beta readers. So yeah, they were a big part of the process, and they've encouraged me throughout it. They've um, given feedback on like where things have grown. That's another super helpful thing that alpha readers can do, is since they're there for so much of the process, they can see where the story has grown and where you've grown as an author and give feedback on that as well. So yeah, you generally want your alpha readers to be people that you know pretty well, authors that you know pretty well, who you know are going to be honest with you and encourage you and all of that. And then beta readers you don't have to necessarily have as close a relationship with, because their job is more just to give a reader impression. So that's basically the difference between the two. Are ARC readers at a third stage beyond beta? Yes. So ARC readers are going to be after you've done all of your self edits, or at least pretty close. Sometimes it's before a proof, like a last proofread, or maybe even a last line edit. But yes, ARC readers are going to read an almost finished version of the book, because they're going to be providing you early reviews when you publish your book. So you definitely want them to have pretty close to the finished thing, so that they can review the book pretty close to what it's going to be when it's published. It's generally okay. So let me talk about who I got to read Calligraphy Guild and at what stages. So the first draft was just me. I wrote up my first draft. I then went through and I rewrote the whole thing and fixed some structural stuff, and then I sent it to my alpha readers. And then I applied some of their feedback. I did a couple more edits, I think. And then I sent it to sensitivity readers to look over the chronic illness stuff, because I wanted to fix that fairly early on if there were any issues with the representation in there. And then I applied their feedback. I might have just applied their feedback, and that might have been the only edit before beta readers, who read it over for a few months. And then I got back their feedback, did some more edits. I did 1 or 2 rounds of edits by myself there, I think. And then I sent it to a line editor, got that back, took care of her feedback. I don't remember if at that point I still had like some things that I picked up on myself in between there that I took care of. Because there were definitely some things that I picked up on like throughout the process in between edits and stuff that I took care of as I was applying other people's feedback. So I took care of the line edits, sent it back for proofreads. And let's see, I think I think it was after the line edits that I printed out ARC copies and sent those out, and then took care of proofreads, and then that was the final version. And I had the same editor do my line edits and my copy edits. You can get two different editors for that. On some books, you might want a developmental editor before the line editor as well. I was pretty confident in the structure of Calligraphy Guild to begin with. Although my line editor then, she did provide some feedback in the line edits that was a little bit more structural, which some of it I didn't apply exactly as she had suggested, and some of it really, really helped with. I had a couple of areas that really were a little too slow, um, and things like that. So I did still do some structural stuff there, but that depends on what editor you get, how much extra feedback they're going to give you. So, are these types of readers only involved in the process of indie publishing or also in traditional? Um, that's a good question. You're probably going to want alpha readers and beta readers. Um, sensitivity readers are optional regardless. It depends on what sorts of topics you're covering. Um, but yeah, you probably want alpha readers and beta readers because you're going to want your book as polished as possible before you start pitching it. And then after it gets picked up and all of that, then the publishing house will also provide editors who will look it over some more. I think some of the authors I follow who are pursuing traditional publishing have also hired editors beforehand to just like get it extra clean before pitching. Um, whenever I have a book that I plan to traditionally publish, I'm probably just going to go with alpha readers and beta readers, and then let the publishing house do the what would be paid edits. Um, but yeah, so you do want extra eyes on it beforehand in both cases. They're somewhat less important in if you are traditionally publishing because the traditional publishing houses will clean it up for you, but it does still help. And since alpha readers and beta readers don't cost you anything except time, um, it's generally a fairly good idea. I'm looking over one of my indie publishing blog posts to see if there's anything in here that I can talk about in between questions. And there's also formatting, which goes between copy edits and arcs. And you can do formatting yourself. I formatted my first 3 books. Most of them have problems, if I'm being completely honest. So yeah, I formatted my first 3 with some help from my parents because they had more experience formatting things in Word. And then I sort of enjoy formatting, but it's also very frustrating and stressful for me. So then with Calligraphy Guild, I hired a friend to do my formatting for me, and it looks much better than any of my other books. And it was a whole lot less stressful for me. So personally, I'm probably going to hire out my formatting for all of my future books. If you're traditionally publishing, then the publishing house will do the formatting for you. Um, yeah, but that's a personal preference thing. If you can learn the formatting and enjoy the formatting, or if you'd rather invest the time than the money, or whatever, if you can do it well, or at least adequately, then sometimes it's worth doing on your own instead. Is there another layer of formatting to do for Kindle? Yes, you do have to do it twice generally, because for one thing, in print, you have to do margins that are wider on the inside of the page than the outside, so there's more space where the spine connects. And in Kindle, that looks weird. You want the margins to be even. Um, Also, the Kindle versions don't normally handle as much formatting. Um, like you don't want them to be as fancy because the Kindle won't read it. Um, so you can do like nice fonts and everything in your print copy that won't apply in the Kindle copy. It's generally fairly close, like certain text, like the alignment of your text and making sure that things aren't double spaced anywhere. All of that generally you can carry over, so you can usually like set up your print formatting and then copy it and then make adjustments for the Kindle. But yeah, you do have to do it twice, unfortunately. Another note is you generally want to do your formatting before you get, at least before you get a full like wraparound cover. You can get your front cover because that one won't change. But the width of your spine is going to be impacted by how you format your book because the formatting is going to change the page count. Um, so if you do your formatting first, then you don't have to adjust your spine like 5 different times. Um, Speaking from experience there. In some cases, you do still want to get your cover and just estimate it because you need arcs or you just want to have it ready or whatever. So my formatting wasn't totally done. My editing even wasn't totally done when I got my cover made because I knew I had arcs that I was going to make. Now, if you don't do print arcs, it's a lot less complicated, but I really wanted to do print arcs and Kindle arcs. So I ended up having to adjust my spine a number of times with my designer, who was amazing. She was super patient and everything. She was amazing to work with. Um, there were also some complications with Amazon's cover template not being quite right. They seem to have fixed that though, so that's good. Um, so yeah, I had to adjust my spine a number of times, but then yeah, it's finally right now. And if you're designing your own cover, then it's it's not necessarily less complicated, but if you're like me and you feel like you're pestering your cover designer to get it fixed like 5 separate times, um, then it's sometimes less stressful if you're making your cover yourself and you can adjust it yourself. Um, but I don't generally recommend making your own cover. You can, and my first 3 covers were designed by me and my mom, um, and I think they look okay. But generally speaking, a professional cover is going to look more professional, and then it's going to make your book look more professional. So there are always trade-offs. There are lots and lots of options with indie publishing, and different options have different strengths and weaknesses, and you really just have to weigh out what's important to you. We're almost at the half-hour mark, so I will leave it open for another question or two and then probably wrap it up. Okay, and I have blog posts about indie publishing. I have a self-publishing checklist. If you sign up to my mailing list, you get access to the resource library that has self-publishing checklist in there. So let me grab some links to put in the chat here. Where is, okay, here's the first of my indie publishing series on my blog. And my newsletter sign up if you want that checklist. And then all of my books are available on my website or on Amazon. If you want to see like the end product of self-publishing. I also have a lot of reviews up on my blog of self-published books. And I think I have a number of them in a list. I have a list of book recommendations that I think has a number of indie published books on it. Yeah, so any more questions? You can, oop, here we go, we've got one more. Noticed many authors offer BookBub free samples. Does that involve another process? I don't know because I don't use BookBub. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. Um, I, yeah, I have my first chapter up on my blog that I just copied and pasted from my Word document. Um, that's the only free sample I have that's not like automatically pulled. Like Amazon automatically pulls a free sample that you can read. Yeah, so I don't know. Um, yeah. So I'm gonna wrap up, but any more questions can be sent to through my contact form on my website, which I will also link in the chat. Or you can email me if you have my email address. Yeah, so thank you for coming, and I hope that my answers were able to be a help to you. Yeah, and I will talk to you later.